This is a CBC podcast. The word on the street is CBC Books is the destination for Canadian book lovers. Read reviews, enter contests, and watch videos. Listen to CBC Radio 1's Writers & Company and The Next Chapter all in one place. CBC Books, where readers click. Go to cbcbooks.ca.
I got a reputation of being like the merchant of venom, destroys stars. You people in the back, this is not true. I love people, really. Ricardo, why do I kid you? Why? Because I don't like you.
So that's the late Don Rickles, insisting he's not an insult comic. He just doesn't like you. I'm Tom Power. You're listening to Q. Today, the legacy of Don Rickles. Fellow comedian Andy Kindler reflects on the life of a man who was always on the offensive then. Once a side project, the New Pornographers are now a band with a long career. I'll ask them how after 7 studio albums, they keep it interesting. Plus, bringing childhood to life, director Kelly Asbury will tell you what it took to animate Beauty and the Beast, Toy Story, and the brand new Smurfs. Coming up on Q. I don't know if you have friends like this, the kind you can go weeks or months, years, decades without seeing, and then you finally see them, you get together for a cup of coffee, and you just pick up immediately where you left off. That's the kind of the dynamic that the New Pornographers have. The New Pornographers are from BC. They're considered Canada's indie rock supergroup, meaning they're a bunch of people who have other musical projects on the go, getting together once in a little while just to do something else. Something special. And even though they've been around for 17 years, their music still sounds fresh. It still has that spirit of just a bunch of friends excited about getting together in a room and making music. Their new album, Whiteout Conditions, though, is their first without one of the co-founders of the band, a guy named Dan Behar from the band Destroyer. So Dan leaves the New Pornographers and then ends up pushing their main songwriter, Carl Newman, into this whole new different direction. And what you end up hearing is their most political and personal record to date. And Carl's opening up about his own battle with depression and with anxiety. So you're going to hear from Carl in a moment, but first we have some music for you. Alongside some of his New Pornographer bandmates, Catherine Calder and Joe Siders, this is Carl Newman of the New Pornographers performing High Ticket Attractions right here on Q.
All the factions that will surround high-ticket attractions. High on the spirit, hopped up and mystic. After the flame baptism, you're fearless. You know the science of falling. You have your calling. You know the song, the Magna Carta. It's underwater. We left it there for the sons and the daughters. One day we'll find it and be reminded when we live under sea like we ought to. Didn't know flying from falling. Clueless the poor thing, sad to report. Didn't know losing from learning. Wheels were turning, you know the song. This thing could go 2 ways. Won't be another exit for days. So pack a small suitcase. Anything else can be easily replaced. You feel the suction, the call to action. They will surround high-ticket attractions. You want to travel, want to unravel. Take the experience to the next level. With no respect for the warning. Violence of yearning, defiance of learning, and protected encryption. The voice of addiction, you know the song. This thing could go 2 ways. Won't be another exit for days. So pack a small suitcase. Anything else can be replaced. You know the song. You know the song. You know the song. You know the song. You can imagine all the factions that would surround high-ticket attractions. Just like the Mayans took all the science and dumped it all in the drink and went silent. They knew the science of falling. They had their calling. You know the song. This thing could go two ways. Won't be another exit for days. So pack a small suitcase. Anything else can be easily replaced. Hey.
It's a beautiful song called High Ticket Attractions from their new album, Whiteout Conditions. That's the New Pornographers in our studio. Carl Newman, Catherine Calder, and Joe Siders. Carl, that last song is absolutely fantastic, and forgive me for being a little presumptuous, but I feel like it's an unusual song for you guys in that I don't necessarily see the New Pornographers up to this point as having a lot of political songs or socially conscious songs. Tell me a little bit about that song.
Yeah, it was basically written what I call the Trump panic. I mean, it was at a point when even like a 10 or 20% chance of him being president seemed a little scary. It's like, I don't like those odds. Like, I want those to be 0% chance. And then when he won, all of a sudden it seemed, okay, well, I was right.
Were you home in New York when he won?
Yeah, which was pretty miserable. I mean, I'm sure it was like unhappy a lot of places, but like my wife took her kid to school and she said it was just like horrible. Like, you know, people hugging and crying. Well, you know, it's no secret that he's a horrible, horrible person.
And I think I've been following your social media, and I've noticed a lot of the, in addition to like retweeting a lot of really interesting things and making a lot of comments, there's also been some allusions to moving back to Canada. Is that something you're seriously considering?
I don't know. It's funny. My wife, who's American, is really into that idea. But I mean, there is that fact that like there doesn't seem to be a what's our long-term plan there? Like it feels like to stay there until, you know, the costs of healthcare completely break us, and then we come back here, well, you know, where it's free. You know, recently we've been thinking maybe we should make a preemptive move and come back. And also considering healthcare, which was not great in America, seems like it's about to get even worse.
Right.
And, you know, of course, when you're Canadian, it seems insane to you. It seems insane to you that something that once seemed normal, like obviously somebody in Canada would say, everybody should have health care, obviously. But you say that in America, you're going to get into a political conversation about, like, I don't know, libertarianism or something.
It's funny you mentioned an escape for you, because in many ways, I think I see the New Pornographers, or I've seen the New Pornographers as an escape for its members, if you know what I mean. Like, I know that Nico Case once called the New Pornographers an escape from rock and roll, or a holiday from rock and roll.
An escape to rock and roll.
Yeah, what was it? A holiday from rock and roll in rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And a place for you guys to escape and play and have fun and be with your friends. Mm-hmm. But it's been 17 years now. Has that changed over time?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, since I moved away, like, I don't see everybody that much. So we only see each other when we're rehearsing and, you know, recording. And so when we go on tour, it's like hanging out with friends that I don't see that much. And I think if we were a band that toured 9 months out of the year, I could see how you would grow to hate your bandmates and think like, I don't want to look at you and I don't want to sit near you on the plane.
That's so interesting. I've always found that so interesting about you guys, is that it just takes such maybe a different ideology or just a different restraint do you always seemed very aware that the new pornographers can get to a point where it's not fun anymore and you don't want to get there?
Well, there have been moments where it's not fun to be in the new pornographers. I don't want you to think it's all a bed of roses. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think, you know, the way we're set up, it's sort of it's a strength and a weakness. The fact that we're sort of scattered all over the place and members live in different places, I think it makes it, we couldn't become that band that tours 9 months out of the year. And maybe some might argue that's held us back.
And now Dan Behar is not in the band anymore. This is a record you made without him. Tell me a little bit about, you know, what is it like working without this guy for the first time? An important member of the band.
Well, I don't know. The weird thing about it is there's always been a weird like separation. Like Dan, like when I'm working on my songs, like Dan's not there.
Right.
You know, like I'm in the room like working on like Dan songs, but so ultimately, like I've said to people, like it's very possible if Dan had been on this record, it would be this record plus 3 more songs. So I've said like, hey, you could take 3 songs from the next Destroyer record and mix them into this album, and you might have, you know, the alternate reality
version of Whiteout
version of Whiteout Conditions. Yeah. So it in that respect, it didn't feel any different to me because except I wasn't working on his songs, which is a little weird because for me, like, his songs were sort of an anchor, and then I'm always self-conscious about my own songs.
Right.
So I'd start a record and I'd go, well, at least we got 3 good songs, you know.
So we got somewhere to start with Dan's songs.
Yeah.
Because
at the beginning, I'm like, all mine are terrible.
I think people might find it a little funny or a little just interesting to hear you say that, because I love your songs, and I think that when I hear you say that, oh yeah, I'm gonna go walk in there and I just know all my songs suck. That leads me to the next song you're gonna play, which is Whiteout Conditions. And what can you tell me about it?
Well, it's weird. I think this is a classic example of a sort of song I've written all through our career, and it might, if you're not listening closely, just seem like a pop song, a slightly upbeat pop song, but it's actually like quite a downer.
What do you mean?
It's a song, essentially a song about depression. You know, it's a song about like the whiteout conditions are just when a person can't think straight.
Yeah.
When they're so down, they're like not looking at the world correctly. And so that it just, I was really happy about the lyrics of this one because they seem pretty honest to me. Because I know a lot of the time I'm just sort of writing, you know, a lot. I think I've written a lot of word salad through the years where maybe I understand what it means, but nobody else does. And sometimes I'll just put a line in there because I think it's great.
Yeah.
And in this one, I felt like in my mind it was like, oh, this is a very much a narrative just about trying to escape from a place, trying to escape from a bad place. It was about one of those things where like sometimes you think you're okay, but you're not okay.
Yeah.
Like something bad happens and you think, oh, I think I'm over that. I think I'm dealing with it. And then you realize like, no, no matter how hard you try, you're not quite dealing with it.
But what about standing up like right now? Like what about standing up, maybe not in the studio, but standing up in front of an audience? There's one feeling that you get when you sing Mass Romantic, you know, which is not as, let's say, not as personal a song, you know, or Letter from an Occupant. These are not necessarily very personal. So I don't glean a lot about you from those songs, though they're absolutely beautiful songs. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine that standing up with your guitar and singing, like you, as you mentioned, a bit of a departure. Songs about anxiety, songs about depression, songs about feeling like you're in a hole and you can't get out, or feeling like there are things you need to get over and you need to recognize that you got over them. It must feel different to sing them in front of people.
Well, you know, I think the weird part is, I think when people write about things like that, there's a general feeling like that should be a downbeat sort of ballad, you know?
Right.
And so to write a rock song, you know, that is about that, I think might take some people off guard because it's like, no, that's those kind of happy songs. Happy songs aren't supposed to have downer lyrics.
And is that hard for you to stand up in front of strangers and talk about something so personal?
Not really, because I realize it's a good thing when you put something out there and there's somebody who like sees that sort of shared experience. And it's somebody, you know, somebody you might accidentally help somebody. Like you could say, hey, I've struggled with anxiety and depression. Somebody might write you back on Twitter and go, me too. Like I'm glad that, I can see somebody can do well and be happy and succeed even when they've struggled with things like that. And I think that's a pretty good, it's good to reach people like that. Like, this is sort of unrelated. I was just talking to Catherine and Joe about it, how at South by, this guy from Power Bottom, band we were playing with, came up to me and said, I've been a fan of yours for years. And he was talking about our video for Sing Me Spanish Techno, how, it's about cross-dressers. And he said, I was 13 years old and I saw, there's people in this video like me. And,
wow.
And I thought wow, that's amazing. Like I didn't make that video. Like somebody, this cool video director came in and said, this is what we want to do. And all we did was provide the song for it. But just the idea that you could put something out there in the world and that maybe there is some 13-year-old somewhere who feels like a total outsider and they feel a little more included. And I think, like when he told me that, I thought, well, that's awesome. It made me feel really good. And so that's just an extension of being open about the things that bother you. Because also things, troubles you have in life are given more power when you try and hide them,
Yeah.
So I think if you just talk about them openly, it's not a big deal.
Carl Newman, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you. Here's the New Pornographers with the title track of their new record. This is Whiteout Conditions.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Flying the ceiling, I'm barely dealing in the faintest of praises, are too revealing. Such a waste of a beautiful day. Someone should say it's such a waste of the only impossible logical way. And flying in LA was open, I wasn't hoping for a win, I was hoping for freedom. You couldn't beat 'em, so you crumbled, you doubled your dosage. One girl said the inhibitor blocking the passage. The thing is massive and the sky will come for you once. Sit tight till it's done. The sky will come for you once. Just sit tight until it's done. Got so hooked on the feeling, I started dealing in a stage of grief so demanding. I gotta stand in every radio buzzing. It wasn't a dream of the moment, wasn't the current that carried me, keeping me going. Only want to get to work, but every morning I'm too sick to drive. Suffering whiteout conditions, forget the mission, just get out alive. Only want to glean the purpose, only to scratch the surface, raise the plow. Suffering whiteout conditions, forget your mission, just get out somehow. Everyone's suddenly busy, suddenly dizzy, oh so easy, it's pushing you over. You're taking tours of a treacherous strip of the Badlands. You have your demands, maybe you riot for nothing, it's just a bad hand. Only want to get to work, but every morning I'm too sick to drive. Suffering whiteout conditions, forget the mission, just get out alive. Only want to glean the purpose, only to scratch the surface, raise the plow. Suffering whiteout conditions, forget your mission, just get out somehow. Flying the ceiling, I see myself in a revival. It suddenly hits me, it's going viral. Such a waste of a beautiful day. Someone should say it's such a waste of the only impossible logical way. And got so hooked on the feeling, I started dealing. But the days spent kicking the cages are too revealing. So committed to your misfortune, still a cheater. Such a waste of a beautiful day. Wish you could be here.
The New Pornographers performing Whiteout Conditions from their album of the same name. That record is out everywhere today.
Would you welcome Mr. Warmth, Don Rickles?
So that music there is what would play whenever Don Rickles appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson or The Late Show with David Letterman. Don Rickles, the legendary comedian, died yesterday at 90 at his home in Los Angeles. And that Matador music was appropriate for a guy who really took everyone on, took no prisoners. Whether he was on a late-night talk show, whether he was doing his show in Las Vegas, whether he was doing a celebrity roast. So here's Don Rickles roasting Clint Eastwood, who he shared time with in the movie Kelly's Heroes.
I must say, I'm here to honor Merv Griffin. I think he's a hell of a guy, and it's a great treat for me to be here for Merv. I do want to say to those of you that ate the fish, you will die. Clint, I say it, nobody else has said it, and I say it from my heart. You're a lousy actor.
You usually hear Don Rickles described as an insult comic. Don really didn't like that label. But when he appeared at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal just a few years ago, he embraced that role as an equal opportunity offender.
This is Montreal. You got to do good. You do good here, you go right to Saskatchewan. Look at the front. They're old people. They don't know what the hell's going on. Is that the husband? Well, God bless you. I'm a friend. Put him in a home. No, I make fun of all people. Catholics, Irish, Jews. Well, Jews, I don't like to make too much fun of.
That was Don Rickles on stage just 3 years ago at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. Don Rickles' career spanned over 60 years, and one of the people he credited with helping him make it big was Frank Sinatra. But despite that, Frank Sinatra, just like everyone else, was the butt of Don Rickles' jokes, as Frank Sinatra revealed when he told this story. And that was back when Don Rickles first started doing comedy, you could not make fun of Frank Sinatra. I mean, he was impossible to make fun of. He was the biggest star in the world. And Frank's going to tell you this story that kind of tells you everything you need to know about Don Rickles and his comedy.
I was sitting with some friends, and he came over to the table, and he said, "Frank, do me a favor, will you?" He said, "I'm sitting with a very pretty girl." He said, "I told her I know you, and she really doesn't believe me. Would you stop by the table?" I said, "All right." I was just about finished. I was down to the espresso, and finally he went back, and I walked by the table, and I said, "How are you, Don? Nice to see you." He said, "Can't you see I'm eating, Frank? What are you doing?"
I think that's my favorite talk show story of all time. Don Rickles was really important to a lot of comedians. And just after the news broke yesterday, I got to speak with comedian Andy Kindler. If you don't know Andy, he's a regular at the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal. He does the State of Comedy. We profiled him on the show a couple of months ago, where he talks about how he feels about other comedians. And he's a huge Don Rickles fan. And his father actually knew Don Rickles when they were kids. We reached Andy on tour in Indianapolis, and he's just after hearing the news. Have a listen. Andy, what does Don Rickles mean to you?
Well, Don Rickles to me, I don't think there's anybody funnier in the world, and or made me laugh than he did, especially when he would go on Johnny Carson and when he would go on Letterman. I mean, like one time Johnny Carson was like stammering, and Rickles, it was like right before Johnny Carson retired, and he goes, "Hey, careful, Johnny, every time you mess up, Leno's at home high-fiving the wife." And then, he's like, I went to visit Dave, David Letterman. I went to visit David Letterman, and he was standing in his backyard, and he was saying, here, boy, he was talking to a person.
I tell you, man, I was watching a little bit of the Don Rickles clips on YouTube today. Like, I don't think I really necessarily appreciated the absurdity of some of the things that he said.
Well, also the bravery of it, because the thing is, what he did was really, I mean, he was a real pioneer, because what his comedy was based on was not on his set act. It really was based on him going off of the crowd. And I think there was that famous thing where they kind of arranged, I don't know if they arranged in L.A. or in Vegas or whatever, but they had a lot of celebrities there, and he put them down. So it really was kind of like a without a net type thing, because you just never knew. And when you watch him on talk shows, I loved it as a comedian, because, he'd go down and up and down and up, and when he hit, it was just incredible.
Before we started recording, you were telling me a little bit about how your dad used to walk to school with Don Rickles, and he knew him as a child.
Yeah, this is like my dad was not in the he wasn't in the business, but it was the plumbing and heating business. But he wasn't in show business. But he grew up in Jackson Heights, and he walked back and forth to school with Rickles. He was like best friends for a couple of years. And so I finally got to meet Rickles at the American Comedy Awards many, many years ago, and I was so excited. I walked up to him, I said, "Mr. Rickles, my father, Larry Kindler, grew up with you in Jackson Heights, and it's so great to meet you." He goes, "Great. Tell Larry we'll have lunch." So that was the first time. Then 2 weeks later, he was doing these image spots for Comedy Central, and I got to be in them. I got to be his driver. So I waited like 2 hours of the shoot, and I said, "Mr. Rickles," and I don't think I called him Mr. I said, "Don, my dad really did grow up in Jackson Heights with you, and you guys were like walk to school every day for 2 years." He goes, "Yeah, I remember. He had a blue jacket." So that was that. And then 2 weeks later, he sends me and my dad signed photos, and the photo to my dad says, "Dear Larry, have a ball," and then the one to me says, "Dear Andy, don't call me."
I'm thinking about it as a comic. What kind of stature, what kind of acclaim did Rickles have amongst comics? What do they think of him?
I heard Letterman talk about this before he retired, about how when Rickles goes, that's really going to be the end of something really huge. I mean, that's how much Letterman loved him. It's just so, it's so, when you're a comic today, you hear so many comics who are in the moment, and you hear them go off script or, ad-lib, but that wasn't really done by many people. Comics like me were always in awe of him, and as I say, especially on the talk shows. I mean, he was unbelievable. I remember one time he said "Yeah, after I'm dead, my wife will be down with Frank Sinatra on a cruise, and she'll say, 'I'll have the red dress and the jewelry.'"
He was doing celebrity roasts back in the 1950s and the 60s. That's something you're seeing have a bit of a resurgence lately. I think sometimes they feel a bit promotional now with some people. But was it a little bit more daring back in the day when he was doing them?
Those roasts were based on people knowing each other. And so it's like, if you look at more of the recent roasts, the ones that are really better are like they did I think they did maybe they did Jerry Stiller or Ben Stiller, but then you had all these people who knew each other. Sometimes in the roast where, well, first of all, I don't see any reason to me, the fact that they roasted Trump is another person to blame for Trump being president, just like Lorne Michaels having him host the show. So a lot of times you are seeing what is a staged event, and the people don't know each other, so there's no like underlying love. But there are some amazing roasters. I mean, Geraldo was amazing, and there's still, I do watch them because no matter who's being roasted, there is something. The form is amazing, which is that you're giving yourself permission to say something outrageous that you're agreeing you're not going to hopefully take that seriously.
If you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Andy Kindler about the legacy of Don Rickles, who died Thursday at the age of 90. And you mentioned saying outrageous things. And I watched a couple of early Dean Martin Rickles roasts today. And it's hard to think of them without him thinking of those some of the more troubling jokes he made, like jokes about people's race and jokes about people's sexual orientation and the way people looked. Like, how do you think history is going to judge that part of him?
I don't think Rickles was a prejudiced person, but I think he was from that generation where maybe he was, he did have his prejudices, but his heart was so pure. It's like I watch comics today from Johnny Carson in the 80s, and they're doing jokes about gay people. They sound ridiculous. Now they sound ridiculous. So I think you always have to remember comedians in the environment that they were operating in. Because absolutely, one time he was on Letterman, and he said something about going to Mr. Chow's in L.A., and then he mixed it up that it was Japanese and Chinese, and Letterman was saying, write your letters to Don Rickles. I mean, I think most people, it wasn't a matter of excusing it, but you definitely understood it, and I don't think in his heart at all he had a mean bone in his body. But definitely, if you look those jokes on paper, you could, because that's one of the things that comics are always talking about. Like, Seinfeld was a couple of years ago was complaining he couldn't play colleges anymore, or he didn't want to play colleges and certain material. It just is that as time goes along, we outgrow these things and we progress as a society.
Sure. But I was even thinking that, like, even you'd think someone like Rickles would kind of wise up as the years go on. But I know even in 2012, he made a joke about, Barack Obama, being a janitor, like breaking his mop at his house.
Yeah, I think I hate to laugh, but I'm laughing because it's such a blind spot. It's such a terrible blind spot. Yeah, I know. No, I don't. I think you could make the argument that he could have changed, but because he was so hilarious and such a great energy to his act, I don't think he obviously did not see that joke was not a good joke to do. So I think mostly almost everybody agrees that no one's perfect, and those jokes I don't defend jokes that are bad just because someone who I like said them, but I think probably in 2012 it might have been a little bit late after doing these jokes for having a style for so long to change your style or to be more aware of stuff.
But the New York Times obituary that's up right now calls Don Rickles an equal opportunity offender. In other words, because he insulted everyone, it's somehow less offensive. However, like I know we've talked a little bit about this before. What do you think of that idea in 2017?
I just think that there was some, like when Rickles would do like a Japanese face, or, I think there's just some prejudice in those jokes, so that it's not, you can't excuse them necessarily by saying it's equal opportunity. So, I mean, I think at some points you have to say, no, that was a mistake. We progress as a society. I think you could say he was an equal opportunity offender in that there was no malice behind any of those things. It really did come from his sense of humor. So if it was insensitive, it wasn't because at his base he had a problem with anybody. But I've loved him for so long. I never ever held it against him. But I also felt weird that he felt like he had to sing at the end of his act.
Well, yeah. He would sing a song but he was an old song and dance man, like Bob Hope or something like that.
No, but I don't even know. It doesn't even matter that he sang, but he sang a song called "I'm a Nice Guy." So, in other words, he felt the need to sing a song that explained that he wasn't. Don't take his prejudices seriously. So you could tell that he struggled himself with it.
Is there anyone you see now as a modern day Don Rickles at all?
I think definitely Dave Attell.
Yeah, the great Dave Attell.
Because Dave Attell, like, you could make any rule that you want to about language, and Dave Attell, within 5 seconds, I'll give you an example. Dave Attell was at a club in New York. I wasn't there, but there were two, Spanish-looking people in the front row, and I guess they weren't enjoying themselves, and he said to them, "What's the matter? Did Selena die again?"
Oh, my Lord.
Well, you think that's too soon? I put you off with that 8-year-old joke, but Attell definitely has that. He definitely has that aggressive but hilarious put down kind of comedy.
Andy Kindler, thanks so much for talking to us about Don Rickles.
Thank you. This really meant a lot to me, and I'm so glad that you called me. Thank you.
Andy Kindler is a comedian. He's on tour right now. We reached him by phone from his hotel in Indianapolis.
Hello, this is Oliver Jones. You're listening to Q.
I mean, I probably don't need to tell you what day it is. I can probably tell from just the way you're skipping down the street today because it's Friday, and that means it's time to cue this. Our resident music experts, Raina Doris and Odario Williams, have sorted through this week's new music releases, and they're here to help you with your weekend soundtrack. Odario is the frontman of Grand Analog. Raina Doris is the host of Radio 2 Morning.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Hi.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Very good. Very well, thank you.
Raina, you're up first this week. What do you got?
Well, if you're feeling anxious about the world, if it has you feeling frustrating, this could be the album that you need right now. It's my most anticipated release of the year.
Oh, my.
I know. And you may feel like you like this guy. If you know who he is, you may like him. You may think you don't like him. Father John Misty. He has a new album out today. It's called Pure Comedy. Here's the title track.
Now that's what I call pure comedy. Just wait until the part where they start to believe they're at the center of everything and some all-powerful being.
That's Father John Misty and Pure Comedy, one of the selections from our Cue This panelist, Raina Doris. If you don't know him at all, tell me a little bit about Father John Misty.
So Father John Misty, he used to go by Jay Tillman. He did sort of a songwriting thing under that name. He also played for the Fleet Foxes for a little while. Mm-hmm. And then he adopted this persona, Father John Misty. And the story goes, the legend has it that it happened after a mushroom trip that he went on.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and so he came up with this persona, and that's sort of who he is now. And this is his third record. The first one he did was about moving to LA. The second one was about falling in love with his wife. And this one it's super ambitious. It's sort of looking at humanity and the human condition, and it's an existentialist kind of work that's looking at the absurdity of all of this and all of us.
Oh, my Lord. That's a nice, easy listening. Odario, are you a Father John Misty fan?
I'm full disclosure. First time I heard Father John Misty's name, I thought he was a comedian or an actor. I didn't know he was a singer. Yeah,
or a father.
Fair enough. And so I have to ask you this, Raina. What came first, the crush or the music? Because I have a lot of friends, male and female, that have a big crush on this guy, and I don't know what came first.
Personally, I don't have a crush on this guy. I actually just think he's an artist, and I really, really like his work.
That's fascinating.
But I don't know. I think it's easy when you feel.
Is he a dreamboat?
He's a good-looking guy, yeah. But I think it's easy when you relate to music. When you really feel music, it's easy to feel that connection with somebody, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You interviewed him one time, right?
I did, yeah.
How'd that go?
It was awkward. I kind of poured my heart out to him, which is not how you're supposed to do an interview. And he told me he hadn't slept the night before. But it ended up being kind of nice near the end. And it turned out it was a little standoffish at first, and he warmed up.
You get the feeling that people either love Father John Misty or they kind of roll their eyes at him. Let's listen to another song. Set up this one, Raina.
Sure. Yeah, he's a bit of a controversial artist. I like to call him the artist who's launched 1,000 think pieces. He's seen as sort of pretentious or aggravating. He's prone to giving rants on stage. And there's a line in this song that got some backlash. This one's called Total Entertainment Forever.
Getting Taylor Swift every night inside the Oculus Rift. After Mr. and the Mrs. finish dinner and the dishes. And now the future's definition is so much higher than it was last year.
Betting Taylor Swift?
Yes.
That's a song called Total Entertainment Forever from Father John Misty.
Do you see why I thought he was a comedian the first time?
Raina, there's been some backlash to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's people who say that it's inappropriate to say betting Taylor Swift in a song, but what he's doing there, he's sort of establishing this dystopian future.
Right.
It's like you can choose to bed whomever you please in your VR set.
Because he's wearing an Oculus Rift, the VR.
Right, exactly. Right. Yes. And he said himself, he says, people who are angry at that, they're ignoring the context of the song. They're generating outrage to generate clicks. That's his quote. So.
And mind you, Kanye West also
That's
talked
true.
about the same subject.
Yeah, no one was talking about that. That was also quiet. Raina, just 30 seconds here. What's your elevator pitch for people to listen to Father John Misty this weekend?
This is a man who is making art. If you look at the world around you right now, there's like the information overload, the division in politics, the endless ways we're amusing and entertaining ourselves to death. He takes it all on this really honest way. It can sound cynical, but there is this line at the end of the title track, Pure Comedy, that I think is just so tender and honest and beautiful. Just random matter suspended in the dark. I hate to say it, but each other's all we got. Yeah.
Speaking of, you're listening to Cue This. I'm Tom Power, Raina Doris, and O'Daria Williams. Each other's all we got here at the Cork table, talking about this week's best music releases. O'Daria, your turn. What do you got?
All right, I've got the best in UK electronic music these days. It's a young man by the name of Slugabed.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's take a listen. What's this?
Right. This track is called Earth Is Gone Sorry.
I was told about the road of all its sons, the way it goes. I was so right from go.
Slugabed with a song called The Earth Is Gone Sorry. Slugabed.
Slugabed.
You know,
What's the story on the... Raina, yes?
when I first heard of Slugabed, I thought he was an actor or a comedian.
Or a father.
Or a father.
O'Daria, tell me, where does Slugabed come from?
Well, okay. So 10 years ago, when he was at the ripe age of 14, his mother called him Slugabed when he just would sleep in on school days. That's really about it. The name stuck, you know.
That's really sweet.
And at the same time, that very year, he also bought a music program package called Fruity Loops. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah.
And to this day, 10 years later, he still makes his music with Fruity Loops.
And that's a very primitive kind of sequencing software,
exactly.
is that right?
It's
not
almost right. It's almost like acquiring the very first Mario Brothers and still using it today and not, upgrading ever.
Right, to the Oculus Rift.
That's correct.
Give us another song here, Dario.
Okay.
Set it up.
So check this out. Most of the album is instrumental. So what you heard there was a singer by the name of Loom. Most of the album is instrumental, and most of it sounds just like this. It's called Feeding Time. Check it out.
I tell you, it landed with QTV producer Steve Johnston out in the control room dancing his guts out to that song.
We're dancing over here.
Raina, you enjoying this?
Anything with air horns good with me. But also, I think, if you go listen to Father John Misty and you're feeling really anxious after, just put Slugabed on. Everything's going to be fine.
That's Feeding Time from Slugabed. O'Dario, what's your pitch here?
Okay, so what's really cool about this, here's a fun fact. He lives in London, but to make this record, he left the bustling town of London, England, to go out to the countryside.
Yeah.
London, Ontario.
London, England, to go out to the countryside to make this. And he was inspired by birds and actually befriended a duck.
Excuse me?
That's correct. He befriended a duck.
How do you do that?
I'm not sure, because I'm not sure. What do ducks eat? Whatever it is, this particular duck came back to the house and hung out with him when he made this record.
Not bread. You're not.
No, you're not supposed to feed ducks bread. That's true.
Well, whatever it was, that duck came back, and the duck was there the entire time.
I love that your pitch for why you should listen to it this weekend is he made friends with a duck.
I didn't get to the pitch.
Get to the pitch. Let's hear the pitch.
If you're into random acts of blippy bloopiness, this record is for you. It's almost mathematical, this record. The groove just has a lot of strange things popping out of it, as you can tell from the last track we played. And it's really interesting, and it just keeps moving and moving and moving and moving. The name of the album, by the way, is Inherit the Earth. There's not really much of a theme to this record, but it is a fun record nonetheless.
I like how you guys brought in uppers and downers this week. It's really good.
Big picture stuff.
O'Dario Williams is the frontman of Grand Analog. Raina Doris is the host of Radio 2 Morning. They were talking about Slugabed's album, Inherit the Earth, Father John Misty's new album, Pure Comedy, on Q. Earlier on the show, we talked to comedian Andy Kindler about the legendary Don Rickles. You might have heard that just about a half hour ago. Don died yesterday at 90 in Los Angeles. He was especially known for his appearances on late night shows with Johnny Carson and David Letterman. But in recent years, he's been showing up a lot on Jimmy Kimmel Live. That's because Jimmy is a huge fan of Don's. Jimmy's seen in some ways as a successor to Carson and to Letterman, and he and Don became friends. And a lot of his late-night talk show last night was dedicated to Don Rickles. Jimmy Kimmel shared a lot of stories, and he got pretty emotional about it.
We've been trying to book him since the beginning. We asked him to do the show over and over again, and he didn't know what this was. He knew the Tonight Show and Letterman, and that's it. But finally, after we bothered him like 20 times, he gave up, and he did the show for my birthday in 2006, and it was exciting. It was like I was in some kind of talk show host fantasy camp, sitting behind a desk while Don Rickles made fun of me. It was like, you know, being a real talk show host for a minute. So, and then Don came to visit 17 more times after that, and whenever he was on, we would go out to dinner. We would always go out to dinner after the show, except for one night. I couldn't go because I was already going to dinner. It was like a late booking. I was going to dinner with my friend Jeff Ross, the comedian. It was his 50th birthday, and he's only in town for like the night. So a few days beforehand, I told Don, I can't go to dinner after the show because I already have plans. We'll go another night. I couldn't tell him I was going to another dinner with someone else, or he would bust my balls till I had none left. So I was non-specific. I just said I can't make it. So we made plans for another night. And after the show, I said goodbye to Don, and I went to dinner with Jeff. And Jeff and I and my cousin Sal are sitting at the table, and who walks in? And not only walks in, is seated at the table right next to us, is Don. He looks at me, he's like, I thought you couldn't go to dinner. And I'm like, it's his birthday, I didn't know. And he hammered me and heckled me through the whole meal. Until finally I just got up and moved over to his table.
That's Jimmy Kimmel talking about his friend Don Rickles. Don Rickles died yesterday at 90. If you missed our tribute to Don earlier in the show, you can find it at cbc.ca/Q. You know, one of the best things about your childhood is how passionately you feel about the things that you like. Like, think back to when you were a kid. You'd spend hours and hours on a chair or on the floor, on the couch, and you'd play the same movies over and over and over again. And I'm sure you drove your parents crazy with Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or Toy Story. Maybe your own kids now, they all love Frozen. If that's the case, you might want to call them into the room right now. You might want to take them out of school, because with me in studio is a man who helped bring a lot of those stories to life. Kelly Asbury is a big deal in animation. His latest project is directing the new Smurfs movie called Smurfs: The Lost Village. And it turns out we have his dad to thank for his love of animation. It started out when they would sit together and draw when he was a kid. Kelly Asbury is with me now. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on. I want to start by going back to your childhood, those days of drawing with your dad.
Yeah.
So you guys used to play a game together?
Yeah. Well, my dad would. We would both draw, and we'd both sort of start. He would start the story with one sentence, and then I would draw a picture that represented that start, and then I would tell the second piece, and he would draw, and we would sort of create these sort of books together that just had this sort of comic strip of these drawings that told the story. And, you know, we both probably didn't draw that well in those days, but it was fun. And it taught me, you know, how to make up stories and draw pictures to represent them from a really early age. And I'll always think that that was really kind of the root of where my sort of passion for that came from.
When you think back to the first animated film you saw, obviously I think the first animated film you see is when you can't remember these things, you know, when you're one or two.
Yeah, I do, though.
But you remember what was the first animated film?
The first time I went to a theater and saw an animated film was when I was probably about 7. It was the Jefferson Theater in Beaumont, Texas, where I grew up. And it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, you got to remember, that was like 1967. In those days, you had to wait years to see these movies. We didn't have DVDs or any of the stuff we have now. We certainly didn't have Netflix. And so we had to wait. So Snow White was coming. And so I was like, you know what? I want to go see it. So my brother and I went to a matinee, and I remember watching it and seeing it on screen. And I just turned to my brother and said, someday I'm going to learn how to do that.
You knew then that this is something you wanted to do?
Oh, yeah. I was on that trajectory pretty much from that point forward.
I love the story that you end up writing to a guy at Disney, the guy who worked on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and 101 Dalmatians.
Oh, yeah.
So what did he? Who's this guy? Ken Anderson?
Ken Anderson was an art director dating all the way back. He really was one of Walt Disney's right-hand men, and in terms of design and just ideas. And I was an admirer of his work from books I'd seen. And I wrote him a letter. And
how old were you?
When I wrote that letter the first time, I was probably about 15.
That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah. At the time, I thought I might as well have been writing to the president. I was a complete Disney nerd at that point. And he forwarded the letter to a guy named Don Duckwall, if you can believe it or not.
Donald Duckwall.
Yeah, his name was Donald Duckwall, and he was a production manager at Disney for years and years.
Yeah.
And I never met him in person, but I got this letter back and I thought, they're joking with me now. What is that? And I realized, no, he's a real guy. And he told me about California Institute of the Arts and told me how to get a job. And if you want to do it, you got to learn. You got to go to school for it. And that's what I did. And that was a long time ago now.
That's incredible. I want to play a clip from the first movie you got screen credit for. This is Disney's The Black Cauldron.
Oh, yes.
I've never seen The Black Cauldron. For as far as I can tell, it's not exactly Snow White. So what you're about to hear, this is when the Horned King uses the cauldron to raise the dead, and his cauldron-born army begins to pour out into the world.
My, such a brave and handsome group. A pig boy, scullery maid, and a broken-down minstrel. Perhaps it may interest you to see what fate has in store for you.
From the 1985 animated Disney film, The Black Cauldron, where the Horned King raises his dead army out of the cauldron. That was the first screen credit for my guest, Kelly Asbury, director of Smurfs: The Lost Village. So I understand it was some kind of bet you made in high school with a friend?
Disney put out in Life magazine somewhere around 1977 or 78, there was a Life magazine article about upcoming films from Disney. And it said that The Black Cauldron would be released somewhere in like 1984, 85. And I said to a person, this friend next to me, I said, you know what? I'm going to work on that movie. You watch. And I ended up doing it sort of by happenstance.
What do you mean?
Well, I was working at another company, and a friend of mine had gotten a job at Disney. It was right after I got out of school, and he called me one day and said, "Hey, they need an in-between artist over here, and I gave your name, and they need him now. And can you just, can you send your portfolio?" So it was just this timing thing where I got in there, and I worked on that movie. It was my first actual animated feature.
You must have been so excited.
I was beside myself. I couldn't believe it. And then to see my name on screen that first time I actually thought, wow, I'm on the path I wanted to be on.
We could talk forever. I mean, I want to fast forward a little bit. We could spend the next 3 hours talking about the films you made. I want to talk a little bit about The Nightmare Before Christmas. I want to talk about Tim Burton. You got to work with him on that. It's considered to be one of the most groundbreaking animated films of all time. Tell me a little bit about working on that film.
Well, the thing is, I wish I could say that I did work a lot with Tim. I worked with Henry Selick, who directed it. Mm-hmm. Tim Burton had developed that story and done all kinds of drawings years before it actually got made. And Tim had actually gone to school with Henry Selick and asked Henry to direct the film. Mm-hmm. Henry is a master of stop motion. He did James and the Giant Peach. He did Coraline a couple of years back. He's just great. And so it was really Henry that I worked the most with. Now, we were influenced by Tim, and Tim came through here and there, and I met him, but I can't...
A dark cloud surrounding him wherever he walks. It was always raining.
Yes, and he was always kind of walking across, he always kept toward the walls.
Oh, my Lord.
He really did.
I don't know if that was...
Yeah, but he was nice enough, but never really got to know Tim. It always disappoints people a little bit because they want to hear all about Tim Burton, and I simply just don't know the guy very well.
No, but I think what I'm really asking about is that this is considered to be one of the greatest animated films, and at least a very groundbreaking animated film.
Oh, yeah.
First animated film to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects.
Yep.
And you also worked on Beauty and the Beast,
yeah.
Which was the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture. For Best Picture. Yeah. I know that animated films sometimes suffer from a lack of recognition. What did that recognition mean to you?
Well, it was as much about the teamwork that went into making it. I had worked on the story team, and I had done some visual development for that picture. My good friends, Kirk Weiss and Gary Trousdale, were the directors. It was their directing debut. We all were in the same peer group coming out of Cal Arts. And so it was meaningful on so many levels, all those that I just named, because it felt like, wow, we actually are entering into a world where adults are kind of re-embracing animation the way they used to before television. Television kind of turned animation into a bit of a babysitter, I think.
Okay.
Saturday
It's
morning
interesting.
TV. Prior to television in the 40s and early 50s, everyone went to animated features, and they weren't just a children's medium. But that sort of happened, and then I think Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and certainly Lion King suddenly brought adults into the theater to see movies. So to see animated movies. So it was certainly a great time to be coming up in the business for that.
That's so interesting, the idea that it became a bit of a babysitter for some folks. And,
Yeah.
and instead of a really artistic experience, one of those great artistic experiences, and I think this hit me at just the right time, was Toy Story, the first full feature-length computer-animated film. I know you worked on that.
Yeah.
Let's take a listen to when we first meet Buzz Lightyear, when he lands in Andy's room.
Buzz Lightyear to Star Command. Come in, Star Command. Star Command, come in. Do you read me? Why don't they answer? My ship! Blast. This'll take weeks to repair. Buzz Lightyear mission log, stardate 4072. My ship is run off course en route to Sector 12.
That is a clip from 1995's Toy Story,
such a great movie.
where we first meet action figure Buzz Lightyear. You were smiling during that one.
Well, it's just fond memories. I mean, I worked on Toy Story in sort of its midpoint of story development. I was only there maybe a little under a year. I was between pictures at the time, and it was between Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach.
Right.
There was a little. I was living in the Northern California. San Francisco is where those movies were made, and my friend Joe Ranft, the late great Joe Ranft, story artist for Disney, he was working with John Lasseter and said, "Look, we need your talent. Come over here." So I said, "Okay, sure." And
you got brought in as a story artist.
A story artist. Yeah.
Forgive me. What does a story artist do on an animated film?
A story artist, sort of with the script as a jump-off point, you're given maybe a sequence or 3 pages of script, and you interpret that script in drawing form, like a comic strip. And then you add gags and you pitch it and things get added to it. But it's sort of the visual writing of the movie. And it really becomes the blueprint for the film is the storyboard that's made into a story reel. And so you make the movie completely in still pictures first.
Kelly Asbury, anyone who has kids of a certain age has watched Frozen probably dozens of times.
Oh, yeah.
I have never seen it. And I said this yesterday, and I had 3 parents in our office look at me and go, "What?" And I asked, "Have you seen it dozens of times?" And they said dozens of times. Did you know how big a hit Frozen was going to become?
At the time I worked on it, my good friend Chris Buck directed it, and he invited me to do some story work. I had finished James and the Giant Peach, and I was like, sure, again, I was between. That's what's great about we all kind of help each other, So I went and I was working at Disney on that, and they were going through a lot of story changes and a lot of turmoil to try to figure out just how to convey the story they wanted to tell, and it takes a while with these movies to find the story. You have to really dig, and we were in the middle of digging when I worked on it. And I actually got asked to go work at Sony when I was kind of finishing up on my time on Frozen, and I remember going, "What are they going to do?" I mean, it was really kind of in trouble.
You weren't sure if it was going to work.
I feared for all my cohorts that were working on it because, it's a tough, these movies are hard.
Yeah.
And you go through this time, just like any production, if you've ever been in a stage production, there's always some moment when everyone's just like, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This is an absolute failure." And then for some reason it comes together as it gets made and all the people team up and Frozen, when I finally saw the film, I was aghast at how wonderful it is. I mean, I was like, how did they pull this off so quickly? It really came together, and I'm really proud to have had any part in it. I had a very small part, but no, Frozen ended up being something special. There's no doubt.
I'm going to end up watching it this weekend, I think. Smurfs: The Lost
You're
Village.
going to see Smurf: The Lost Village this weekend.
First, right away. This is your fourth run at directing, and the movie sticks truer to the original cartoon than previous Smurfs adaptations. How much freedom did you have taking an iconic cartoon like the Smurfs and rebooting it?
Well, fortunately, I had a lot of freedom regarding the look, particularly. I wanted the movie to really go back to the Peyo comic books from the 50s and 60s, really. And he had such a wonderful style of drawing, and it was 2D, and it was very bright and colorful and buoyant. And I wanted to convey that in a way that I don't think it's ever quite been done. And I luckily had Sony Pictures Animation and Sony ImageWorks. The team of artists that work for those companies are just incredible. And we all got on board. We all kind of, once again, a director of an animated feature is only as good as the team behind him. And I had so many people just on my side trying to get this right. And Christine Belson, the president of the company, came in about 2 years ago. She really championed the project and trusted me quite a lot. And it was a great experience.
So we mentioned Toy Story there and Beauty and the Beast and Nightmare Before Christmas. The reason I bring these up is because how do you take these past experiences you have with some of the greatest films, much less animated films made, and channel them into this new Smurfs movie?
Well, it's all, every movie has its own challenges. Every movie takes on its own personality when you're in the middle of working on it. Every team of people becomes like this big sort of family trying to work together to make something, and you learn something with each one, and you fine-tune your skills, hopefully. And with something like Smurfs, I wanted to make sure that we did a movie that was appropriate to the subject matter. It's a Smurf movie. It's not, we didn't say, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make Manchester by the Smurf.
Yeah.
We're gonna make something really serious here. We're gonna make Smurfy's Choice.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do that. We wanted to do a movie that was. I love the movie Goonies. Mm-hmm. I love The Wizard of Oz. I love Stand By Me. I love To Kill a Mockingbird. And all of those movies sort of came together. They're a group of kids going on an adventure together to accomplish something, and it's about teamwork, and it's about finding your strength and exploiting it. That's what the movie is. And I didn't really target it for any particular audience, but there's no one that's going to ever say it's anything but a Smurf movie. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing. I want that to be a good thing. And so I think I have to leave it to the viewers to see how they feel about it.
I want to ask this question before we let you go is, you started out with the Black Cauldron, which is, I would say, a very traditional form of animation, yes. and essentially drawing.
Yes.
And now you're deep into this computer animated style of drawing. Are you ever wistful for the old days of old animation?
Sure. I mean, I think that they are. The computer and the digital side of things is really just a new paintbrush for the artists. But it's taken a few things away. Most of the artwork is produced digitally. Almost all the storyboards are now done on a Cintiq tablet, on a drawing digital tablet.
Yeah.
And so it's taken away all that volumes of original artwork that we used to have that, that's going to eventually be something that is strictly owned by collectors. And those are things that I think is a loss. Mm-hmm. But I also think that, you're never going to find anything more rich than a hand-drawn image. Mm-hmm. and someone who's really, the people like animator Glenn Keane or Mark Davis or these classic Disney artists, that is something that I think it will always be a great, beautiful art form. I hate to think that it's something that's dying away, but you don't see that richness, at least in America, very much. Japan still embraces 2D animation a lot. There's beautiful work coming out of Japan. So it'll always be there, but I think that more and more kids are just expecting everything to be digital. Mm-hmm. And it's I don't know what's next. Virtual reality is going to change things. So
you can live with the Smurfs
if you want. Yeah, I guess that's next.
Kelly Asbury, it's been such a pleasure.
Oh, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kelly Asbury is the director of Smurfs: The Lost Village. It is out in theaters today. If you're in Toronto, the movie is opening the TIFF Kids International Festival tonight, and Kelly Asbury will be hosting an exclusive chat after the film. That's it for Q today. On Monday, John Waters, he's the patron saint of cult filmmakers, directed Pink Flamingos, the original Hairspray called The Pope of Filth. And he's giving advice to new artists saying, go out into the world and make trouble. Plus, the finale of Searchlight, CBC Music's big talent search, wraps up this weekend. We're going to have the winner right here on the show on Monday. And don't forget to tune in to QTV on Sunday at a new time at 2 p.m. to see interviews with BB Rexa, Mandy Moore, Veronica Roth, and much more. I'm Tom Power. Later on.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.